right, hello everybody. All right, if you have not yet taken the Curiosity Styles assessment, you can find that at nowwhat.com/curiosity if you want to go ahead and take that, or you can try scanning the QR code there as well. We're going to be talking about these results in a bit more detail throughout the session.
Yeah. We'll give you like another minute to finish that. Okay.
And it's also at bit.ly/curiositystyles if that is more helpful.
All right, here goes. Welcome, everyone. We are incredibly excited to be here today at South by Southwest. The energy is incredible, so very excited about that. I'm going to kick off with a question. What would you do if you weren't afraid? I'm sharing that because that is my North Star question every time I have a difficult decision to make, and it really works. I'm Paul Barnett, founder of Now What, the creative question company, and I am a rebel.
And I am Hannah Singelman. I'm head of creative questions at Now What, and I am a voyager.
So what do we do? Well, Hannah and I, and everyone else at Now What, we ask and answer questions for the most iconic and influential companies in the world.
And we help them build cultures of curiosity.
So Nike, Pepsi, Airbnb, Meta, Netflix, Apple, Heineken, Lego, and many more. We're very proud to partner with these curious companies. But let's make it about you. Who are you? Who are you? You are 1,000 of the most curious people at South by Southwest, all in one room, right here, right now. I mean, just think of the power of all of that curiosity in one place. So I think we should all congratulate ourselves, not just for being the 1,000 most curious people at South by Southwest, but also, if you think about it, 1,000 people gathered in one room. Maybe we are the most curious people in the world. So, congratulations. So, why are we here today? Well, today is a live experiment in making curiosity contagious. And why curiosity? I got a list here of like 20 reasons, but there's one that really stands out. Connection. Right? It's the essence of getting to connection. And that's why curiosity is so incredibly important.
So for the past 2 years, Paul and I have been researching and exploring curiosity and questions as the language of curiosity. We've interviewed and connected with more than 100 of the most curious minds in the world from 100 different professions to really understand what curiosity means to them and what can we learn. So one of our biggest learnings is that there's not just one way to be curious. And if all of us here want to go about making curiosity contagious, it really helps if we can channel a diversity of curiosities. So that is what we're going to show you how to do today. We're going to show you how to channel 4 curiosity styles specifically.
So let's get curious about who's in the room. Inner children, can you stand up? All right. We're going to count this later. Okay. You're the dreamers, the visionaries, the creatives, and, you know, the world really needs people like you at the moment, so thank you. You can sit down now. Great. All right. Rebels, my people, you can stand up.
Oh.
Interesting. This is a good number. All right. If it wasn't for us, just things would stay the same. And that's because we were born to fight the status quo, which makes us troublemakers. And, I'm okay with that. I wouldn't have it any other way. So sit down if you want to, don't want to. I know you don't follow any rules. Yeah. All right, tinkerers, your turn. Can you stand up? Okay. So Hannah and I have figured out the secret to making you guys happy. Give you a challenge and an opportunity to solve a problem. Sound right? Okay, good. All right, you can sit down. All right, last but not least, Hannah's people, the Voyagers. Can you stand up? Okay, lots of Voyagers here.
Ooh, it's usually the rebels that are the loudest, but happy to have you in the Voyager court.
So the capacity of information that you all can consume, it's just staggering. With Voyagers, there's no such thing as too much information, TMI. So that's matched with this magical ability to connect the dots, often in really new and surprising ways. It's an incredible skill.
So for the rest of our time together, we want to make it a little easier when you walk out of this room to channel each of the styles, both your dominant style that you stood up for, but all the other styles as well. So what we're going to be doing is playing some video clips, spending some time hearing from curious minds that represent each of the styles so that you'll get a crash course in what it's like to think, to question, and to be curious, like the inner child, the rebel, the voyager, and the tinkerer. So first up, we have the inner child.
Okay.
The inner child is the type of curiosity style that really approaches curiosity like a playground. They embrace the magic of a beginner's mind and move through life with open eyes and open ears. We always like to say that they're susceptible to wonder, but impervious to assumption as they take in new perspectives, skills, and insights. So Paul will introduce you to our inner child now.
All right. We found someone that completely embodies being an inner child. His name is Mauro Porcini, the Global Chief Design Officer of Pepsi. Now, Mauro is just this incredible, lovely guy. I want to be his friend, to be honest. He's kind of like this adult version of a child, but in the best possible way. My favorite part of our interview was when he shared a story about his earliest experience of curiosity. When he was very young, his father gave him a camera. And Mauro could have just stayed home, taken photographs of the things that he knew. But that's not Mauro. He got on his bike, he got out there, and he explored town just to find the unexpected. And that's the same Mauro today, right? It's his philosophy. Get outside yourself, open yourself up to getting lost so that you can unlock and open yourself up to things that you're just not thinking about. And that's why all of us are here at South by Southwest, to get lost and to open ourselves up.
I realized that curiosity is something very powerful, and therefore that you need to very consciously invest in this. The best investment of the time of the company, and therefore the resources of the company, is actually the one of getting lost in those unexpected places with a full dose of curiosity inside, and really, it's a great way to grow and get better at everything, we do in life, personally and professionally. At this point, I'm really addicted to this, that insatiable curiosity to bump into something unexpected, unusual, and magic every time. So the feeling is a feeling of excitement driven by the potential of what could happen. And this is literally, I think, one of the biggest drivers of my curiosity. Every time, I travel, or I read a book, or I talk with a stranger, or I talk about a new topic with a person I know very well, every time there is something new, there is that excitement for the potential that that newness could unlock. And I've been saying this for all the past 12 years in PepsiCo, before in 3M, my teams know. An example of this is I tell them, look, every time you travel for business, you go from New York to Dallas, or from New York to New Delhi, or to Tokyo, anywhere you go, if you have the possibility, do not go just to another meeting room to do meetings and that's it. Get out and get lost in the city. I'm gonna pay for that extra night, but get out, and I don't care what you do. Go have fun. Go have fun. Go to, fun restaurants. Go visit, touristic places. Meet people. Do whatever you want, but get out. The more you expose yourself to new things, the more you increase the probability that something happen in your life that make you change perspective on something, or they make you do an action, something that you were not expecting before, that could radically change the trajectory of your life. This happened to me so many times, decisions I took that many people wouldn't have taken because they meant to get out of your comfort zone. They meant to do something that was embarrassing you, or was not easy to do, was too difficult to do. But that's the beauty of getting out of your comfort zone. You don't need all the time things to go right. You need few times, and they change your life and make your life better. And so it's a process that is inefficient by definition. But if you are a curious person, you will find excitement in that inefficiency, and then you will enjoy the effectiveness of those few moments that change the game.
So 3 things for channeling the curiosity style of the inner child. So first things first, the inner child leads with a possibility mindset. Their curiosity is insanely motivated by the endless potential and possibility that the world has to offer. There's a refreshing and often palpable, as was the case with Mauro, right? Sense of joy, wonder, and excitement for the world around them. And when it comes to questions in the inner child's language of curiosity, they're really great at what we like to call novel inquiry. They're constantly asking questions about what is out there to experience. And it's by exposing themselves to new ideas, people, conversations, places, literally anything, that they put themselves directly in the path of inspiration. We even hear Mauro talk about it like an addiction, right? He craves novelty because of how it opens his mind to new ideas and possibilities. And then last but not least, perhaps the greatest gift of the inner child is their ability to be curious without expectations or judgment. So Mauro talks about the beauty of a beginner's mind, of getting outside of your comfort zone. You might not know what you're going to find, you might not be any good at it, but you do it anyway, because that's how you learn, that's how you grow, and that's how you feed your curiosity.
So, for all of you in the room that aren't inner children, I want you to be able to walk out of here and to be able to channel the inner child. Think of Mauro, channel him, and put yourself in the path of inspiration.
So our next curiosity style is the rebel. There we go, there we go. So the rebel approaches curiosity like a blank canvas. They're the rule-breaking optimists at heart who love nothing more than to disrupt the norm. And they really believe in curiosity's power to rewrite and reimagine the world around them for the better. So Paul will introduce you to our rebel now.
Okay. Alyssa Amore Gibbons, she was named Time Magazine's Next Gen Leader for her work designing environmentally conscious architecture. In our interview, she shared her design process. I love getting inside people's heads. That's the curiosity thing, right? And, we learned she doesn't start with questions about budget or the number of rooms, because those are just really conventional questions. Instead, she starts with really unexpected and much bigger questions like, how can we design out the bad? How should we be living our lives? What builds a society and causes self-actualization? These are questions about the whole human experience that inherently challenge the status quo. and that makes her a rebel.
I think for me, curiosity is about not taking everything as it's presented. You kind of have to have a bit of rebel in you to dare to question. I ask myself, what if a lot? What if you got this right? Or what if this is beyond anything that you thought was possible to come out of your mind and onto paper and into the physical world? I think sometimes we stop ourselves from dreaming. And I clutch desperately onto that and onto my imagination, because what if? You know, what if it does work out? What if it's the best thing ever? I play on the outskirts of what's possible, and I do it intentionally, because what if? Not just accepting that, you know, this is all there is to the answer, the solution. You gotta dare to do something or break something or pick it apart and try to figure out why it is the way it is. Especially if you're in a creative field, I think you need space to just try. So the what if is an opportunity to build into my routine how to pivot and think differently, because tomorrow I could wake up and a hurricane passed, and instead of building a 10-story low-income housing, I might be building a 10-story hospital. You spend so much time, particularly in lesser developed countries, you spend so much time trying to fix the bare minimums, you know, shelter, adequate housing for the majority of the population, you know, water scarcity, food scarcity. Why did a vendor have to pass out from a heat stroke last year? We have the technology to know all of the issues that we're facing. Street layout that turns its back away from the waterfront, where in any other city, that would be prime real estate. But we've developed on the back of a colonial heritage where people and trade came through that route. So all of the buildings look away from it, and no one gets to enjoy the beautiful ocean and river that cuts into our capital city. Those are the questions that I ask myself about the city. How do you design out some of the bad experiences? How do you change their rituals and their routines just by the way you design a space? I love those kinds of questions because it forces us in general to think about, what's the quality of life I want to design for myself, not just the one that perhaps I've inherited. And then when you take that from an individual experience and ask those questions at a societal level, it totally changes everything. There's this collectively agreed upon idea of what our existence here is. And I'm not always sure that we all got it right. So now, how do I design urban spaces where persons can occupy and feel safe? How do I think of that level of sanctuary at an urban scale, at a civic scale? How do I design these third places where you go there not to work, not to sleep at night, but to just experience something different? You know, those are the things that build a society. Those are the things that cause self-actualization. I love those questions because it forces me to realize that they're not exclusive and they're not mutually exclusive. You can do that and still dream. You can attack those problems, but you can also design the next public library that somebody like me 10 years from now with big ambitions could sit down and open a book and feel like I'm going to change the world.
3 things to keep in mind when you're channeling the curiosity style of the rebel. So the first thing to call out here is that the rebel really leads with a challenger mindset. We often see the thinking of, well, this is the way it's always been done, as a call to action for rebels and a really big sign that their curiosity powers can be used for good. They're naturally resistant to the status quo and really get curious about what could be done differently, or even in the language of Alyssa Amore, how they might play on the outskirts. When it comes to questions and the language of a rebel's curiosity, they're really great at what we like to call disruptive inquiry. So they're asking questions to disrupt and to break out of conventional thinking. Their curiosity is really driven by seeking out what's not working and what could be changed, what could be done differently. And we see this in Alyssa Amore's rallying cry, right, of what if. It's rooted in the belief that there is a better world to build, different than what's been built before, or different than what we've just inherited. What if this idea you dreamed up is beyond anything you thought possible? What if it's the best thing ever? Imagine where these curiosities, these questions could take you. And last but not least, rebel's curiosity is equal parts stubborn and optimistic, as some of us on this stage know all too well. But it's a really powerful and distinct combination for change, and it's one of my favorite parts about working with rebels, right? And we even can think, again, the language that Alyssa Moore uses. She talks about attacking problems. She talks about clutching desperately onto her imagination. But what that can teach us is that daring to dream, daring to reimagine how things are done, daring to remain curious, these really require relentless belief and a hope that change is possible, and your curiosity can take the world there.
So again, for all of you in the room that aren't rebels, and if you want to channel them, channel Alyssa Amore Gibbons. Dare to question what others aren't questioning, and then create against the grain. And I'll add one more. If you happen to fancy channeling me. A couple of weeks ago, I was walking around in New York, and on the sidewalk, someone had sort of scrawled a couple of words that were really meaningful. Dream until it's your reality. That's a rebel.
All right, next up we have the tinkerer. So the tinkerers are the ones that approach curiosity like a puzzle, and they can't resist taking things apart piece by piece. And it's really by looking at all the individual details of something that they're able to take the best of what they find and put it back together in completely new and creative ways. So Paul will introduce you to our tinkerer now.
Okay, so Marcel Boda is a product development leader with decades of experience ranging from medical and consumer devices, sustainable industrial practice, automotive and construction technologies, which is a lot. And he just leads this incredible company. It's called 10Beta. We've partnered with them. It's really special. I'm in awe of them. So I want to share with you two stories of Marcel's curiosity. When Marcel was 6, his father bought him an automatic watch, and he told him not to break it, which Marcel promptly did. In the process, he discovered that reverse engineering a watch and putting it back together, well, that was much harder. So he had to go to MIT to figure out how to fix the watch. And, you know, then there was this other story. There was this moment where he was in class, like chemistry class, and he got very curious about these crystals, potassium...
Permanganate?
Permanganate, yeah, mouthful. Potassium permanganate crystals. And these crystals are just incredibly potent, and they change the color of things. So he thought about stealing them, and then thought better about it. He went to his teacher and said, "Can I just buy them off of you?" And the teacher says, "Well, why? What do you want to use it for?" And Marcel explained, "I just want to see how many crystals it would take to turn a whole swimming pool purple." The teacher, very unwisely, gave him the potassium permanganate. He went away, and he turned literally every pool in his town purple. And why every pool? Well, again, that's Marcel. He tests, he learns, he tests, he learns. So let's watch the video and see where Marcel's curiosity has taken him more recently.
So for high-speed product development, we have, I'll use an example. When we did the ventilator project, in the beginning of the pandemic, we're tasked by the mayor's office and the EDC to build the ventilators for New York City. So we designed the ventilators and got EUA or FDA approval for those units within 30 days and shipped 3,000 to New York City, most of any private group that shipped. So we were locked in a building in Long Island City and could only use the tools and materials and supplies available to us. It wasn't a blank slate. It was only what was in the box, right? So, and the way we solved that and the way we dealt with risk and questioning was that we ran a bunch of parallel tests that we knew were all likely to fail in order to learn from the failures and how failure happened throughout the process. And it would be every few hours, there would be a new test rig to give us the data we needed on how to quickly work through what was effectively, through one lens, a sea of product failures to get to that essence of what might work. A lot of our work needs to discount or eliminate subpar solutions, because during a brainstorming process, you might come up with 100 ideas. And the goal here is that you are not trying to come up with 100 ideas that are final products, but you are trying to eliminate ideas that sound great, but through testing, you have validated that they're not as great as they sound. So when we look at asking the questions of the test that we're going to run, we want to have a clear understanding of what is the product that we want to make. Why would the user want it? What is the user experience that's desired? So we focus on that before we touch engineering. So the questions, again, when I start a project like this is, do we need to solve it? Do we need to be involved? Can it be solved with an off-the-shelf solution with a slight modification even? Or and if we say, no, there's no other solution, are we clear on what the user experience is going to be when the intended user experience? Because if you don't know who you're making it for and why you're making it for them and why they're going to love it, why bother?
3 things for channeling the tinkerer curiosity style. So first is the idea of an optimization mindset, right? Their curiosity, Marcel's curiosity, the tinkerer's curiosity, really thrives in that test and learn environment, from ventilators to turning swimming pools purple. They really love to experiment with ways to make things better, faster, stronger, newer. They're also completely energized by obstacles and constraints, so it's really rewarding for their curiosity to find a way forward and to problem solve. And the higher the stakes, the higher the reward. When it comes to the tinkerer, the questions they're asking, their sort of language of curiosity, they're really great at what we like to call practical inquiry. So the tinkerer's curiosity works best under clarity and efficiency, and their questions are really going to be ones that help them hone in on where they can make the biggest impact. Others may tend to see the tinkerer as spending a lot of time in the weeds, but for a tinkerer, that's how they get to the root of a problem and ultimately a solution that actually makes an impact. Because otherwise, in the succinct and wise words of Marcel, why bother? And then last but not least, I think that Marcel brilliantly shows us the superpower of a tinkerer's curiosity through this idea of how to strategically reframe failure or how to fail up. So what others in the ventilator project might have seen as a sea of failures, Marcel and his team saw as an extremely valuable data set that could help them understand what could work, what could be viable. And last summer, actually, I was leading a curiosity workshop with Lego, and there was a team of engineers in the group who scored really high as tinkerers. And as I was walking through the material, I used the word failure, and there was a visceral reaction from the table of tinkerers in the back. So we actually used that as a moment to pause, check in, what was surfacing for them. And they told me that failure just was not a word in their lexicon. They don't see things in terms of failure. They see things in terms of opportunities to learn, moments to pivot, and moments to think about what might work instead. So I think that's a really valuable lesson from Marcel, from the engineers at Lego, from all of you tinkerers in the room. If we kind of open up what we think about as failure and success, there's a lot of new pathways for curiosity to go down.
For everyone that isn't a tinkerer in the room, and if you want to channel the tinkerer, set yourself a challenge. Break something apart. Put it back together better than it ever was. And then commit to being comfortable with failure. I'm not joking. I'm not kidding you. Failure is always your best friend.
All right, we're now moving into our last curiosity style, the voyager. So the voyager, myself included, approaches curiosity like a treasure map, following their instincts to the ends of the earth in pursuit of their knowledge. They have a really adventurous spirit that guides them on their quest to learn as much as they can about the people, the places, and the ideas out there.
So I'm going to introduce Rebecca Irby to you. She's an educator and activist who opens up spaces of peace and cross-cultural communication worldwide. She was part of the 2017 team which won the Nobel Prize. It's amazing, it's a Nobel Prize. And she holds special consulting status at the United Nations and her NGO, the Peak Institute, where she's a co-founder and board president. So again, kind of in awe, right? Nobel Prize winner. Very few people in the world have won a Nobel Prize. So Hannah and I were just so incredibly excited just to sort of see inside her brain and just what kind of curiosity could take someone there. Well, start at the beginning. Rebecca grew up in a household, single-parent household with not a lot of money. And her memory, right, she reached back to when she was 3. I don't think anybody else did that. And she remembered going to her mum and said that she felt that there were kids out there in the world that were hurting. And her mum was like, well, how do you know that? You're 3. And we don't have a TV. But that's just something that Rebecca felt, right? And that's because Rebecca sees people. She also shared her story about an early job where she was called in to understand why a group of employees were tardy. She gave these people a seat at the table to understand their truth. And again, that is very Rebecca. She understood, they weren't tardy, they just didn't have transportation. So I think her power is seeing people and giving the marginalized a seat at the table, whether it's in the workplace or for abolishing nuclear weapons. Now, throughout the interview, Rebecca kept on using the words, dig deeper. Hannah and I would just about begin to grasp a concept. We've decided that she is just unusually intelligent, so we were keeping up. And, we would get there, we would grasp the concept, and then she would say, so digging deeper, right? And that's a voyager. There's no such thing as TMI. But if seeing the full picture and the whole person brings you and everyone else to the truth, then TMI is always good policy.
We wanted to look at collective action and systems change and use that framework for our strategy. It's something that you can use and shift to any space or vertical once you understand the dynamics and the questions that will help us get to that deeper thinking and shifting of our mental models. So we looked at the inverted pyramid model and thinking of that first level being explicit. This is where we can see our policies, our practices, our programs. And this is typically actually where we see most change taking place. When we dig a little bit deeper and we start to think about, okay, what is holding those programs in place? What makes them possible? And at this level, we're talking about relationships. So relationships with other people, but also relationships with power and with resources. So we can think about resource flows and how that is upholding or benefiting the projects and policies that it's connected to. Now, when we go even deeper, what is even upholding all of this? And that's our mental model. That's the way that we're thinking about all of these policies, about the ways in which we react to one another. What research shows us and what we have learned from our experiences is that in order to see true transformation that holds and is lasting, we must hit all three levels at the same time before we even get started. There are three questions I always ask, especially when I'm working with different organizations or governmental groups. These three questions ensure that there's equitable treatment so that we're not in an echo chamber and we really get a diversity of views. So these questions are, if we enact this, is anyone going to be harmed? And if so, why? Next question, who did we not invite to the conversation? Who's not at the table? Have we set a space which is welcoming to them? And then lastly, and certainly not least, we have to think really deeply and consider, are there even people that we don't think about or that we've not considered the impact that this can have? And again, this is before we make decisions. When I've seen these questions employed in the past, it's almost always after the fact. I would say that that is the exact wrong approach. Let's make sure the people who are affected by policies and programs are the people that are at the tables. When we were working on abolishing nuclear weapons, we made sure that there were representatives from all the Pacific Islands where the testing happened, as well as the Hibakusha, who are the survivors of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When we want to see lasting change, it's really thinking about ensuring who is at the table, creating a safe container, and then looking at and strategizing how we can help change people's mental models, how we change people's relationship to power, how we change their relationship to resources, and then we can think about what kinds of programs and policies we create to ensure that this change we want to see is possible.
So 3 things that you can be doing to channel the Voyager's curiosity style. First up, the Voyager leads with an exploration mindset, right? Their curiosity, as we've said, doesn't believe in such a thing as too much information, and they're really great at methodically going down different paths to feed their curiosity, to seek answers, to seek understanding. They have a really expansive and oftentimes, in the case of Rebecca, systems level approach to curiosity, and we like to say that their worldview sort of exists in widescreen. They're taking in a lot. They're taking in the full picture. When it comes to the questions and the Voyager's language of curiosity, they're really great at what we like to call contextual inquiry. So they're asking questions to gather information, to synthesize information, en route to actually making sense and deeply understanding the way things are. So when we hear Rebecca keep returning to that phrase, dig deeper, it's because a Voyager's curiosity is best translated into action once they have that solid grasp on the lay of the land, once they've been able to dig deeper. And this is especially true for any situation that's complex or ambiguous or uncertain. Last but not least, because of the Voyager's expansive lens for seeing the world, for gathering information, they have a real superpower to connect a diversity of dots in unique and powerful ways to get to new solutions or new answers. They really excel at weaving together all the divergent perspectives and ideas that they've collected along their curiosity journey and putting them together into new transformative solutions that lead to that lasting change Rebecca was talking about.
So, again, for those of you that aren't Voyagers and you just want to channel this incredibly special person, Rebecca Irby, seek out diverse perspectives, ideas and experiences. And Hannah came up with this one, and I love it. Complicate your understanding. Right? All right. We started with a gift, the gift of one question from me, my favorite question. But, Hannah and I wanted to give you the gift of more questions. So out of the 100 interviews that we've done, we've put together a montage of some of our favorite questions, but representing each of the styles that we've talked about today. So, roll the tape.
And your only job is to just take one of these questions from any curiosity style, and we hope that you use it before you leave South by Southwest.
One of the things that I say to my students is that you never walk into a hospital room, because I was a hospital chaplain for a long time, and say, how are you doing? Because they're in the hospital and they're sick. We know how they're doing. But you say things like, what kind of day are you having? What's on your heart today?
So questions of experience are questions that turn people into storytellers instead of putting them on trial. You don't ask them, why do you believe what you believe? It comes off aggressive. You ask them, how did you come to believe what you believe?
You know, what I always tell founders, you and I both know one thing for sure. This model will be wrong, right? Because it's based on a million assumptions. Guaranteed some of them will not be true, right? So what happens if your assumptions are wrong? Which assumptions can you afford to get wrong and which ones you can't? So a lot of time is spent on that.
My default setting is, and here's why this won't work. It's what if it does? And that's very inspirational for people, right? Because they feel that ideas have room to breathe and ideas are fragile.
But we start with what we call cosmic questions. And those are questions designed to teach children to think critically. How can we be kind to one another? How can you be a peacekeeper in the classroom? You know, what does it mean to have peace? How can you be a more peaceful member of your community?
Am I bringing the best out of you? It's a very honest question and honest conversation. It's not hard to ask. It's hard to hear the answer, but it's an important question to ask.
I asked myself, okay, well, what's the way I would approach solving any problem? Well, my background is anthropology. So I will try to solve for a challenge using whatever I can bring to the table. And so that was the question I would always ask, is like, well, how can I bring my skill set? How can I uniquely inform the context?
A question that I ask people often is, do you know what your genius is? What is your genius?
How could it be better? If I could redo it from scratch, how would I approach it? It can apply to your business. It can apply to your life. It can apply to anything. The day that we stop asking ourselves that, nothing ever changes or improves at that point.
Are you happy with how you take up space? You know, how we take up space correlates with how we show up in the world. And so I am very cognizant of how people take up space and when to encourage people to take up more space.
Instead of asking things that are factually based, I like to ask questions that get to the root of like what they're passionate about. So instead of where was the last place you went on vacation, you know, what was it about it that drew you there? What was the part of the vacation that lit you up the most? Where was the place you've traveled to that you felt most at home and why? Those are questions that will get them more excited about the conversation.
In terms of empathy and compassion, I'll say that in my lifetime, and especially looking the way that I do growing up in Texas, I've had a lot of opportunities to feel empathy for people who don't have it for me. And in some way, I think the extreme version of that is to say, how do you fight hate with love?
We are in a moment of extreme crisis in so many ways across the world. I think that we got to really reimagine what is required right now. Too often we're limiting our imagination before we even get started. I want folks to be more in the mode of what if? What would it mean if we tried? What if we did X, Y, Z? What does it look like for us to just try it together and then see where we get to go? What is stopping us from trying, right? Rather than being fearful of all that might come if we tried. It is highly contagious. Curiosity, hope, joy, all that stuff is contagious. If I can get one other person to join me, and if 2 can become 4 and 4 can become 8 and 8 can become 8 million, we've actually changed the world together.
Hopefully you spotted some fellow curious minds from South by Southwest sprinkled throughout that montage. And the last thing we want to leave you with is, if your curiosity is sparked, we did just launch our podcast, One Better Question, where we dive into full interviews with a lot of the curious minds that you just saw in the video, and really talk to them about curiosity and their one better question.
Okay, so before we get into questions, Hannah and I both wanted to thank everyone here and thank you again for being the most curious people at South by Southwest. Let's all get out there and let's make curiosity contagious.
Wonderful. So I think you can submit questions via the South by Southwest Go app, and you click Engage on the event page. So if you have any questions, if you have any curiosities, ideas, we would love to answer them. I am seeing one about what happens when you have the same score as 2 curiosity styles. That is something we see frequently, and really the idea is that you do want to have a well-rounded curiosity, but it just means that you kind of are comfortable and confident flexing between those 2 styles the most. Yeah, stand up and ask a question too, whatever works.
The curiosity styles, are they influenced by the occupations people took, or do they took occupations that match their curiosity styles?
Ooh, okay, we had a question about, do the occupations match the curiosity style, or do they probably end up in that occupation because of their curiosity style? Chicken or the egg sitch? We do want to study that more in depth, but I think often what's been in, I know Paul shared like those earliest experiences of curiosity, there often are sort of those early signs where people do express their curiosity and then they end up in a profession with like eerily similar overlap. So I think it's probably a mix of both, but there do seem to be some really strong traits that are with us from childhood. I mean, nearly every tinkerer we interview broke a clock or a watch or a bike and tried to put it back together. So there's definitely some themes.
Yeah, and the curiosity assessment that you've taken, I think so far we have about 10,000 people, and we just need to analyze it by profession because I am sure that there's a pattern there.
All right, some other questions. What would each of you do if you weren't afraid? I would do this.
Yeah,
Can I take your answer?
I think I was there as well. Yeah. I had to ask myself that question to get me to South by Southwest. So, and I really hope that you adopt that question. It was gifted to me a couple of years ago, and it's just helped me in my life so much. Every tough decision that I've had to make, I just stop and I ask myself, Paul, what would you do if you weren't afraid?
All right, what is the difference between playful and adventurous? Okay, that's fun. I think it's fine. We were talking about the playful attitude, and it's in an Amy Poehler masterclass all about improv, but she has this rule about in improv, you can't be halfway in, and I feel like that's how we like to think about the inner child. And even if you think about like an actual child on the playground, you can't be halfway on the monkey bars, can't be halfway down the slide. You're kind of all in, and you're just there, you're present in the moment to experience it. I think there's also that element from Morrow of the joy and the excitement and just that wonder about what could happen. I think adventurous, we tend to think about it more in terms of just getting a wealth of information and really daring to sort of explore what could you learn from this person? We often talk about the Voyagers like, what can I learn today? Any situation they're in, what can I learn? What's the next rabbit hole I can go down? So I think there is definitely overlap, but I think the possibility, the wonder versus that like diversity and just like going all in on a topic. What do you think?
Well, actually, I'm going to go for the next question. What was your impetus for launching this project, and how did you develop your research guide? Well, the impetus was boredom. It is with most things in my life. I've been doing this thing, asking questions, for a long, long time, and I love it. I really do love it. But I want new questions, so I needed to look outside my swim lane. And very serendipitously, I was at acting class, right? You know, you have to do something that's outside of work. And at the end of my scene, which I was horrible, the teacher said to me, what worked and what would you wish for? And I just told her how terrible I was. And she says, no, Paul, what worked and what would you wish for? So I was very curious, why did she ask me those questions? And she said, well, look, these are confidence-building questions. This is what young actors need to build confidence. And I started trying that out at work because I have a large team of young people, and everything now is what works and what would you wish for. And I'm so pleased I learned that. And then from Dina Levy, the incredible acting coach, if ever you're in New York, she's very cool. From her, gosh, we spoke to a matchmaker that taught us how to make questions more interesting. We spoke to a commander in the Special Forces that taught us about situational awareness questions. I mean, we spoke to a Nobel laureate. There is like no limit to the number of people that Hannah and I actually want to speak to. Yeah. It's going to be a really big book when we get it.
All right, other questions. Some people are not curious. How do you learn if a person is curious? I think a lot of times in our research, we do push back. Like, I think everyone is curious, but we often also talk about curiosity as a practice. It's not always easy to be curious. It's also not always rewarded to be curious. So I think that everyone has that curiosity within them, and something else we talk a lot about is how can we sort of energize someone's curiosity? And we break that down when we do workshops for clients about the curiosity styles. Like, there are specific ways to energize a voyager's curiosity, an inner child's curiosity. And on the flip side, there are specific ways to drain their curiosity. So I think having that understanding, that's how you can start to unpack that. And I think that also might answer advice for getting younger employees to be more curious about their job, field, or organization. If you kind of think about what would the language, like an inner child, they're playful, they're joyful, they love novelty. Are there ways that you can sort of like lean into that language if you know that that younger employee is an inner child? Tinkerer loves problems, loves constraints. Can you set them challenges to sort of solve about their job, their field, or their organization? So I think that's another way when we think about making curiosity contagious and the importance of a diversity of curiosities. There's nuances to each one, and once you have that understanding, you can start to unlock new ways of working together, connecting, creating, and really empathizing and energizing their curiosity more often than you drain it.
Okay, we had another question up there before that was, I loved. What was Now What's origin story? So I got fired. I'm a rebel. I am not good at working for other people. Is what it is.
How many times did you get fired?
7. Yeah, it is an achievement, right? There's no such thing as failure. So, the origin story of Now What, I like to tell it like this. It was a dark and stormy night somewhere in Brooklyn, and I was sitting on a stoop with a friend that also is a potential client, right? She worked for BMW. I mean, dream client, right? Right at the start of the business. And she asked me what my company was called, and I said, well, I've registered it as Paul Barnett Incorporated. And she said, God, that is boring. I'm not gonna recommend you. That's awful. So, you know, I do what I know how to do, research. I asked her lots of questions about, well, what did she want in an agency? What does she need? And that's where it sort of came to me. She didn't need more information. She was sitting on so much. She needed something more strategic. She wanted to know, now what? And when I heard those words, I thanked her very much. And that's how Now What was born.
Right, at what point do we develop our curiosity styles? Do you find that children all fall within inner child until a certain age? I guess the answer to this is sort of a non-answer. It's something that we want to explore in research. We're actually going to be going into preschools and sort of understanding and observing like how children are, because they do have this sort of pure form of curiosity. So we're not positive, but I do think that joy, that wonder is most often rewarded in younger children and kind of gets stamped out of us oftentimes. So I think that's probably a right hypothesis, that it's probably easier, more comfortable being the inner child when you actually are young.
I am actually really loving this question from Anonymous. Thank you, Anonymous. What if asking, what would you do if you weren't afraid? What if that's not enough? What would you say to someone who's stuck in responding through fear? And it's not what you would say to them, it's what you would say to yourself. There's typically a power dynamic. You know, we are taught from a really young age that it's only the people in authority that ask the questions. You're in school, and it's the teacher asking you questions. You get into trouble, and it's the cops, the police, they're asking you questions, right? So it's actually up to you to create a space for curiosity, right? You have to be aware of the power dynamic. You have to be aware that people are nervous sometimes at asking questions. But as their leader, right, it's just up to you to create the conditions where your team feels like they can express themselves.
What books, podcasts, etc. do you recommend for those curious about curiosity? Our podcast is a great place to start, but also everyone we've interviewed is brilliant in their own right and has a book or a podcast of their own. So I'm just trying to think. We interviewed this amazing journalist. Her name's Monica Guzman, and she wrote a book about how to have fearlessly curious conversations in dangerously divided times, and it's all about her parents they're Mexican immigrants. Her parents are Republican. They voted for Trump. She's liberal, and they were sort of at this crossroads of what is our relationship going to be. And her entire book is about radical curiosity, how to be fearlessly curious. And she gives a lot of practical tips. And Paul and I, there's a podcast episode about it, but we were sort of talking about politics as like the ultimate torture test. And if you can have that kind of conversation, think about all the other ways you'd benefit from having conversations. So that's just one off the top of my head, but there's a ton out there, and I think just follow your instincts.
All right. I think I'm going to take two of these questions at once. I recently applied for a strategy position, and I considered it, a VP of curiosity. Someone stole our idea. Can I have some suggestions on how to grow appreciation for curiosity in an operational culture? Well, that's something that we do. We go into everybody from Lego to PepsiCo, and we train them on how to create curiosities of culture. So we'll try and put some information up for you guys about that. The other question that really struck me was, could certain types benefit from channeling one different style over another? And did you identify complements and pairs? So if you click through on the assessment, you'll see that you have your dominant style, but you have a second, a third, and a fourth one. So I'm a rebel, but I'm also an inner child. Hannah, a voyager, but also an inner child. Is that why we like each other? I don't know, but it certainly complements.
And we often think about the curiosity styles sort of existing on a matrix. So the inner child and the rebel are both very malleable in their approach. They're a bit more freewheeling. And the voyager and the tinkerer are more methodical and systematic with their approach. So oftentimes when we do go into organizations, and even within Now What, that is the malleable methodical divide is sometimes the steepest, and that is, especially going back to the idea of curiosity energizers and drainers, oftentimes what energizes a rebel is what drains the tinkerer the most. So I think that's also where like having that awareness, having that shared language, having that understanding that we're all moving through curiosity a bit differently, we're all seeing things a bit differently, that's how you can start to have new conversations, or at least be a bit more empathetic when you're working with different styles.
Okay, so I think we are at time. Let's finish with this. Go out there, make curiosity contagious. Thank you.